Chapter 3, M Mabeuf by Victor Hugo from the book Les Miserables. Jean Valjean's purse was of no use to M Mabeuf. M Mabeuf, in his venerable, infantile austerity, had not accepted the gift of the stars. He had not admitted that a star could coin itself into louis d'or. He had not divined that what had fallen from heaven had come from Gavroche. He had taken the purse to the police commissioner of the quarter as a lost article placed by the finder at the disposal of claimants. The purse was actually lost. It is unnecessary to say that no one claimed it and that it did not succor M Mabeuf. Moreover, M Mabeuf had continued his downward course. His experiments on indigo had been no more successful in the Jardin des Plantes than in his garden at Austerlitz. The year before he had owed his housekeeper's wages. Now, as we have seen, he owed 3/4 of his rent. The pawnshop had sold the plates of his Flora after the expiration of 13 months. Some coppersmith had made stewpans of them. His copper plates gone, and being unable to complete even the incomplete copies of his Flora which were in his possession, he had disposed of the text, at a miserable price, as waste paper, to a second-hand bookseller. Nothing now remained to him of his life's work. He set to work to eat up the money for these copies. When he saw that this wretched resource was becoming exhausted, he gave up his garden and allowed it to run to waste. Before this, a long time before, he had given up his 2 eggs and the morsel of beef which he ate from time to time. He dined on bread and potatoes. He had sold the last of his furniture, then all duplicates of his bedding, his clothing and his blankets, then his herbariums and prints. But he still retained his most precious books, many of which were of the greatest rarity, among others, Les Quadrans historiques de la Bible, edition of 1560, La Concordance des Bibles by Pierre de Besse, Les Marguerites de la Marguerite of Jean de la Haye, with a dedication to the Queen of Navarre. Book de la Charge et Dignité de l'Ambassadeur by the Sieur de Villiers-Hotman, a Florilegium Rabbinicum of 1644, a Tibullus of 1567 with this magnificent inscription, Venetes in adibus Manusianes, and lastly, Diogenes Laertius, printed at Lyon in 1644, which contained the famous variant of the manuscript 411, 13th century, of the Vatican, and those of the 2 manuscripts of Venice, 393 n, consulted with such fruitful results by Henry Estienne, and all the passages in Doric dialect which are only found in the celebrated manuscript of the 12th century belonging to the Naples Library. M Mabeuf never had any fire in his chamber, and went to bed at sundown in order not to consume any candles. It seemed as though he had no longer any neighbors. People avoided him when he went out. He perceived the fact. The wretchedness of a child interests a mother. The wretchedness of a young man interests a young girl. The wretchedness of an old man interests no one. It is, of all distresses, the coldest. Still, Father Mabeuf had not entirely lost his childlike serenity. His eyes acquired some vivacity when they rested on his books, and he smiled when he gazed at the Diogenes Laertius, which was a unique copy. His bookcase with glass doors was the only piece of furniture which he had kept beyond what was strictly indispensable. One day, Mother Plutarch said to him, "I have no money to buy any dinner." What she called dinner was a loaf of bread and 4 or 5 potatoes. "On credit," suggested M Mabeuf. "You know well that people refuse me." M Mabeuf opened his bookcase, took a long look at all his books, one after another, as a father obliged to decimate his children would gaze upon them before making a choice, then seized one hastily, put it in under his arm, and went out. He returned 2 hours later, without anything under his arm, laid 30 sous on the table, and said, "You will get something for dinner." From that moment forth, Mother Plutarch saw a somber veil, which was never more lifted, descend over the old man's candid face. On the following day, on the day after, and on the day after that, it had to be done again. M Mabeuf went out with a book and returned with a coin. As the second-hand dealers perceived that he was forced to sell, they purchased of him for 20 sous that for which he had paid 20 francs, sometimes at those very shops. Volume by volume, the whole library went the same road. He said at times, "But I am 80," as though he cherished some secret hope that he should arrive at the end of his days before reaching the end of his books. His melancholy increased. Once, however, he had a pleasure. He had gone out with a Robert Estienne, which he had sold for 35 sous under the Quai Malaquais, and he returned with an Aldus which he had bought for 40 sous in the Rue des Grès. "I owe 5 sous, he said, beaming on Mother Plutarch. That day he had no dinner. He belonged to the Horticultural Society. His destitution became known there. The president of the society came to see him, promised to speak to the Minister of Agriculture and Commerce about him, and did so. "Why, what?" exclaimed the minister. "I should think so. An old savant, a botanist, an inoffensive man. Something must be done for him." On the following day, M Mabeuf received an invitation to dine with the minister. Trembling with joy, he showed the letter to Mother Plutarch. "We are saved," said he. On the day appointed, he went to the minister's house. He perceived that his ragged cravat, his long, square coat, and his waxed shoes astonished the ushers. No one spoke to him, not even the minister. About 10 o'clock in the evening, while he was still waiting for a word, he heard the minister's wife, a beautiful woman in a low-necked gown whom he had not ventured to approach, inquire, "Who is that old gentleman?" He returned home on foot at midnight in a driving rainstorm. He had sold an Elzevir to pay for a carriage in which to go thither. He had acquired the habit of reading a few pages in his Diogenes Laertius every night before he went to bed. He knew enough Greek to enjoy the peculiarities of the text which he owned. He had now no other enjoyment. Several weeks passed. All at once, Mother Plutarch fell ill. There is one thing sadder than having no money with which to buy bread at the baker's, and that is having no money to purchase drugs at the apothecary's. One evening, the doctor had ordered a very expensive potion, and the malady was growing worse. A nurse was required. M Mabeuf opened his bookcase. There was nothing there. The last volume had taken its departure. All that was left to him was Diogenes Laertius. He put this unique copy under his arm and went out. It was the 4th of June, 1832. He went to the Porte Saint-Jacques, to Royal's successor, and returned with 100 francs. He laid the pile of 5-franc pieces on the old serving woman's nightstand, and returned to his chamber without saying a word. On the following morning, at dawn, he seated himself on the overturned post in his garden, and he could be seen over the top of the hedge, sitting the whole morning motionless, with drooping head, his eyes vaguely fixed on the withered flower-beds. It rained at intervals. The old man did not seem to perceive the fact. In the afternoon, extraordinary noises broke out in Paris. They resembled shots and the clamors of a multitude. Father Mabeuf raised his head. He saw a gardener passing and inquired, "What is it?" The gardener, spade on back, replied in the most unconcerned tone, "It is the riots." "What riots?" "Yes, they are fighting." "Why are they fighting?" "Ah, good heavens!" ejaculated the gardener. "In what direction?" went on M Mabeuf. "In the neighborhood of the arsenal." Father Mabeuf went to his room, took his hat, mechanically sought for a book to place under his arm, found none, said, "Ah, truly," and went off with a bewildered air.